Awesome. Well, I'm sure Laura must be, and her team must be excited to have you on board as well. What have you found interesting about this project?
I think the whole process. I think the fact that the bond has failed the last 3 years, and really going back to ground zero and getting our base minimum program, which we developed last summer, and really looking at all the different sites and all of the different possibilities and coming back with this proposal is really an amazing thing.
So what is that you're holding there? It's about minimum
sure,
standards.
yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay.
What does that mean? I mean,
basically, I helped Ed Murdo work on the state educational standards.
now Ed Murdo, for the viewers,
Is the Department of New Hampshire Education Director.
and he is the director of the.
New Hampshire Department of Education.
Thank you.
And HPOE, right?
Yeah, great. Okay.
And I helped him because the standards haven't been updated in 25 years, so it was time to update those standards.
Education sure has changed in 25
It
years.
has. And what they did so that all schools in New Hampshire would provide the minimum needs that they feel would meet the school standards and the program standards is set minimum square footage targets, if you will, for classrooms, gymnasiums, media centers, cafeterias, etc., so that we have something to go by and something that we have to do per state law in order to get the state funding. So they assure that minimum square footage.
And they came up with minimum square footages. I think Laura spoke on this a couple of programs ago about, I found it very fascinating. It makes sense once she explained it about minimum standards in a science room when you have an open flame, or maybe in the nurse's room when you have more than one student in there ill at the same time.
Right.
Is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
It's like how many people can populate a space based on the program that's going on in the space.
Correct. For instance, the classroom minimum square footage is 900.
900.
Most of the classrooms that the kids are currently in are about 600.
Oh.
So it's adequately or misadequately smaller.
Sure. Yeah, and everyone who owns a home probably realizes the square footage when you start taking it away. It's like it gets a little smaller. Well, that's very interesting. So these numbers aren't random numbers. The state really did a study and said for best practices of education.
Correct. And for instance, the 900 square feet is a 30-foot by 30-foot space, and within that space, there's typically built-in furniture like we have here, desks as well as long tables, because sometimes they do group activities, so they need to be flexible.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Laura, Ingrid mentioned the state of New Hampshire and state aid. So tell us a little bit about state aid as far as how does the school qualify for that? Does this project qualify for it? Could you expound upon that?
Yes, the state of New Hampshire and the Department of Education offer a building aid program to aid communities in their financial end of building projects. They also lend their approval on the minimum standards, on the whole plan, as Ingrid was just talking about. And there's two parts to this. One, we have a question, will state aid continue in New Hampshire? And on the other hand, we have, how do we go about assuring that our design complies with their program so that we do qualify for their aid?
I see.
And just last week, in fact, Ingrid had a meeting with these plans with Ed Murdo, and we have been given a conditional approval on the plan, and that is posted on the school website. And that is terrific news, that Ed approves of the design, the program, the space, the layout, etc. So the state aid is apportioned by grade and by area agreements, meaning when you have a contract with another town to come to your school.
As Lebanon does.
As Lebanon does. Up through 8th grade, we only have the one town of Grantham. in high school it increases.
Mhm.
So in a real overview, because it's a lengthy formula,
Mhm.
Lebanon would look to gain the aid of a range between 35% and 40% based on grade level of students
Mhm.
and the area agreement.
And you said this program will be going away at the end of June.
Yes, the legislature has put together a study committee to investigate what could be done differently with the program, because in the long run, they have found it not to be sustainable.
Mhm.
They need to work through their own budgetary concerns and develop a program that's easier for them to manage. However, this group felt very strongly that they could not abandon school districts such as Lebanon's in the winter season as we approach town meetings and our deliberative sessions and voting. To that end, the committee made a very strong recommendation to the legislature that says any project voted in by their voters before June 30th, 2010 is promised the aid as we know it today. That will continue through the duration of the bonds on these projects, again, voted by June.
And how much money could that mean to this project?
That could mean in the range of $8 to $9 million, and that is delivered back to the districts on an annual basis as you pay your debt. It's not a lump sum that comes in.
Now, speaking of the state aid, Ingrid, are there other advantages to building a building so there could be an increase in state aid?
There are, and that's another great fact about this project is the school board has agreed to do what's called Northeast CHIPS.
Yes.
And it's an acronym for Collaborative for High Performance Schools.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very similar to the U.S. Green Building Council's LEED program.
Oh, sure.
Where they have different categories of sustainability and high performance features.
Mm-hmm.
So there's literally almost 100 different points you can get as you go through the design in terms of site issues, water conservation, building envelope, energy, because we're doing the biomass, solar, materials, recycling, and it goes on and on.
Oh, great. And you've incorporated into these plans.
We have a preliminary checklist of what we hope to get for points. When we met with the Conservation Commission regarding the wetlands on this site, there's a point that if we constrict where the contractor can modify the land, so we'll be really paying attention to how far they go out around our buildings and around the fields to minimize that site disturbance, which is a really good thing to do. And
it's great.
For doing this, there's a bunch of prerequisites that you have to do, but there's also points, and you need to get 30 minimum points to qualify. So once you do that, we would get an additional 3% of state aid.
Wow.
And we did the first school that went through this process in 2005, Merrimack Valley High School in Pennacook, and blazed the trail and set up that whole system with Ed and everything. So we're very knowledgeable about that.
Oh, that's great. So I love those energy saving features. And well, speaking of features, why don't you take us through some of the features and point a few things out that you think the viewers might find really interesting about this